Welcome to episode 8 of the Not Another Fitness podcast. Hopefully, we sound slightly better quality this week. Amy, would you like to test out your new microphone as well?
Hello, Andy. We've just been discussing our microphones. Mine is very phallic, but and Andy looks like a Radio 1 DJ.
I've really gone all out DJ set for this one. Got on Amazon and went crazy.
Yeah. But no, we have upgraded our kit.
I mean, once I get out of the biggest and most echoey room in the world, that will be hopefully the final upgrade. Like, imagine when there's a carpet or a floor to avoid the reverb from.
We'll be getting soundproofing next. We'll be soundproofing the walls.
How much is it to soundproof a wall?
I don't know. You've got the builders in at the moment. Maybe you could ask.
Can you imagine if I slipped that one in? Right, Barry. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, you fitted the doors. Yeah, just one other thing. Can you just soundproof this room for us?
And while you're there, could you pop a mirror on the ceiling?
Yeah, that'd be ideal.
He'd be like,
dear.
"Oh God."
I think we've got a fairly good relationship with the builder as well. I don't want to kind of tip him over the edge in the home straight. I'd rather just got it done, to be honest.
Brilliant.
What have you been up to this week, mate? What's going on?
What I've been up to? I've had a nice long weekend, actually. So I had Saturday, Sunday and Monday off, which is nice. I usually work Saturdays. So Jack and I decided that we would go somewhere other than Stortford to go for a walk yesterday. So we got as far as Stansted and then the heavens opened. So we turned around and went back.
Slightly less chatty on the way home. Slightly less.
So we literally drove to Stansted and didn't even park. We turned around and came home. We just timed it completely wrong. So the weather's been against us this week. But apart from that, it's been a good week. Lots of clients, lots of programming, lots of good check-ins. I had some really, really good check-ins with clients this week, which I will expand on shortly. But yeah, really feeling very motivated with how they are implementing changes, which is good. And this week, actually, we're recording this on a Monday. This week, Liftoff have just started their outdoor programming. So we are doing outdoor classes now with groups of 5 people, which is exciting because I'm hoping to be, I'll be coaching some of them later in the week, and I'll also get my hands on a barbell myself, which is very exciting for me. So so that's how this week's looking. How have you been, mate?
Yeah, I've been good. That's cool though, isn't it, about the outdoor sessions, because it's another step on the road to normality. It's like another little tick box in the post-COVID column. Yeah, my week's been pretty good. Like similar to yourself, went out the weekend a couple of times, got caught out in the rain both times. That was fun. One was down by the coast as well, so that was particularly brutal. But I did get to see my sister, brother-in-law and little nephew, so
nice.
That was very nice. Fish and chips again by the beach. That was cool. Yeah, it was nice. And it is good. Like it's one of them, isn't it? Like seeing family members and stuff is something that we've like definitely that will be one of the positives to come out of the whole COVID thing. It'll be hopefully appreciating family and friends and just that time to interact and stuff. And even though it was weird, like turning up to I don't know if you've had this yet, like, you meet a friend. Well, actually, when I saw you in town, like the instinct is to hug. And especially massively. Like my little nephew and stuff, that was quite difficult. But it was nice to see him. So and training wise, what I've been up to, a couple of runs in the bag. Ran my fastest mile actually last week for a long time. So we're getting there. We're getting there. Probably haven't got the endurance that I had kind of last year, but speed wise feels like it's coming back. So coming into the summer months, I'll start doing a few longer runs.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I nearly hit my fastest 10K today. I was on track to hit my fastest 10K.
I saw your little post up earlier on today.
Yeah.
I was just seeing that on Facebook.
I just wanted like under an hour, and I did 7.6 kilometers or something in 45 minutes. So I think I was on track.
Yeah,
but
bang on.
It was one of those classic things where I hadn't set out with any kind of intention for the run at all, just to see how I go. And I think I set out with in my head that it was going to be harder than it was. So when I started and it was feeling good, I was like, okay, I'll keep going. Oh no, I don't want to peak too soon. I'll just run home. So yeah, but it's funny, isn't it?
I've enjoyed it so far. I don't want to ruin it by doing that extra 2.5K. I just want to stop now. It's fair enough. It's fair enough.
Yeah, no, it was good running conditions though. Now it's cooled down a bit. It's good running conditions. So yeah, I was enjoying it. I'm very much a fair weather runner though, and I've got to be in the right mindset. I think mindset is quite an important thing when you're setting out for a run. So
100% with you on the. I'm a fair weather runner. I do get out every once in a while, but if it's pissing down with rain, not for me.
Yeah,
it's the thing is, at the moment, I think at the start of lockdown, I think for most people, even though the weather was stunning, I think you'd have got outside whatever the weather, because people were just like, I cannot stay inside 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
But summer is my prime running months of the year, so hopefully there'll be some good ones coming up. I tell you what, a good little like running program for anyone out there who is kind of, I don't know, just bored of going out and doing like the kind of same thing. Split your run up into kind of 4 quarters. So like I went out and did this 4 miler the other day, and you do like a mile kind of incremental pace, just kind of steady, gradually getting faster. Then you run a mile kind of above your threshold. So not, one that you couldn't do like back-to-back miles at that pace, so going quite hard. Then you back off for a mile, and then the last mile you go absolutely hell for leather and see what you can crank out. And you end up running, obviously you run 4 miles, but it's mentally breaking up into like four miles feels easier than just going out and doing a 4 mile run. But as a way of getting, you're out for a half hour, you get some speed work in there, you get to kind of judge pace, so it ticks a lot of boxes, and it's a good one. That I really enjoy that. If you're running, you can apply it to smaller distances as well. So if you're just doing 2 miles, you just break it up into half mile chunks. But it's good. It's a good way of getting faster.
Or even just 30-second fast strides. So just thinking about actually just lengthening your strides for 30 seconds in order to pick up speed, and then just taking it back down again for 4 or 5 minutes, and then again lengthening your strides and really focusing on technique as well, I find really helps with running. Big time. Because I'm a classic like short strides shuffler, sound like an elephant every time I hit the ground. I don't pick my knees up. I really don't.
the shuffler.
Jack's like, how are you so dainty and you sound like an elephant? I'm like, yeah, I know. So yeah,
it's a skill I have.
So just picking your knees up as well. Lengthening your stride really helps. But so that was nice to get a good run. So good run week all round.
We just laid the groundwork for the running podcast that will be appearing in a couple of weeks' time.
I'm out. Definitely not.
We should do a Q&A. Do a Q&A on. I'll do one running. You can do Olympic lifting the next week.
Heaven. I don't even claim to know enough about Olympic weightlifting. But yeah. Well, I have just had a client that's got her snatch PB though, which is pretty impressive.
You do yourself a disservice, Rambo. You know what's going on. Well, let's hope you know what's going on, because we've got some questions or some topics today to cover. Do you want to lead off, because this is one of your clients that kind of spurred this topic on?
Yeah, and so I had a check-in with a client, and he's got permission for me to use this. Well, I've got permission from him, to use this example. And he smashed his first week. It was his first week with me. Focus was very much on building him a schedule that he can stick to, because he's a paramedic and a night shift worker, and historically he's kind of really, really struggled with obviously really erratic sleep patterns, really erratic energy levels. He's got a 1-year-old as well now, so wanting to spend time with the family, juggling that with his wife's work as well. So there are periods of the day where he can be awake for 36 to 48 hours, depending on his shift. So not great when you think that he's a paramedic, but he's been doing it for a long time now and very, very used to that way of working.
Yeah.
And he actually suggested that we talk about this. And we had a bit of back and forth, didn't we, mate, about like texts of how we can actually label this and how we package this up in a podcast. But my client said, this is why I wanted to work with you, because you understand what I go through as from your experience as a flight attendant. And we had a conversation where he said, look, sleep isn't a priority to me. He goes, I am never going to be able to get 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night. I might only be able to get 4 hours sleep. I might be only be able to get an hour sleep. It might be 20 minutes in like the single bed when I'm at work. That physically might be all that I am going to be able to get, but I'm never going to make it a priority, because if I have a choice between spending a few hours with my wife and my daughter or taking those extra hours and getting some kip, I'm always going to spend time on like spending the time with my family. And I feel like you understand that more than any other PT that I've worked with. And he said it was a really good topic for us to discuss in terms of meeting a client where they're at. So I can sit here as a PT and, and as a coach and just say, okay, 4 hours accumulatively over long periods of time. I know the research. I know what it does to hunger levels. I know what it does to life expectancy. I know what it does to the risk of health-related diseases. But I would not be meeting him where he is at if I was adamant about my prescriptions. And I said, right, based on your schedule, you need to now get 9 hours of sleep a night. And he's had coaches say that to him before and say, look, you really need to make this a priority. And yes, I know he really needs to make that a priority. And I'm not devaluing the importance of sleep in his life and in his lifestyle. However, I cannot tell him what he finds important. And if he is saying to me, I would rather value my family time over those extra 2 hours of sleep, so I can only get 5 hours of sleep, for example. Okay, well, sitting here as a coach, what can I do then to make those 5 hours of sleep that he has the best 5 hours of sleep that he is going to get? I have to meet him where he is at. And we were just saying, weren't we, about it's about how the client sets the goals and how we as coaches have to be adaptable. And it might be that my goal for him as a coach is to get him to that place of 8 hours sleep. But if that is the one thing that I keep in my head for the whole of the time we work together, especially in the initial stages, bear in mind, he's already told me that there's a certain degree of resistance with regards to that goal. We're never going to make ground. It might be that that is an achievable goal, but not for another year or so, or 2 years. I need to meet him where he's at now and focus on the areas where he obviously is more willing to make change, rather than saying to him, well, what you're doing now isn't good enough. You need to do X, Y, Z, and basically you need to be better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. And one of the kind of off the back of that, we were just talking about that predicament, I suppose, as a coach, where you're put in where you want to, your training, your experience might kind of be leaning on you one way, whereas the client in front of you is kind of pulling in another direction. And it's, how do you resolve that? Do you just kind of, slap the client around the side of the head and say, no, I'm in charge, obey me and do as I ask? Or do you let the other extreme is you just let the client take over completely and you just kind of become completely submissive? And we talk, and we talk about these things as coaches and trainers, because because it really I don't know if I'm assuming hopefully you feel the same. It really helps, right, when you have client situations like that, to talk it through with someone who, you know, like people who have similar experiences, or I had this issue, how did you deal with that? And we do that for a few reasons. Probably chief amongst them is like the well-being of the client. It's like, right, what can I do to get the most out of working with this client, in terms of how can I give them the best results or the best service? But also as PTs, we're trying to, on this kind of ongoing process of becoming better coaches ourselves. And that's why we kind of settled on, is there an official title for this podcast?
Well, I think we decided on, is your PT doing you a disservice, didn't we?
Yeah. And that's, you know, that sounds kind of negative putting it out there like that. But, but it's...
Or maybe we should repackage it then. Could your PT serve you better?
There you go. Yeah, that's very well. And especially spoken into the new mic, that sounded delightful.
You're welcome.
But I think that's it, right? And I think you can broaden this out to PTs as well. You know, if you're listening to this as a PT or a coach, you know, what can I do to give a better service, or are there areas that I'm falling short, or behaviours that actually are not helping with that coaching process? So yes, we're gonna kind of talk around that. And one of the first things he says, bringing up the itinerary for this episode, it's kind of the qualification process, I suppose. Like, you know, how you become a PT, how much work you have to do to get that qualification, and the ongoing work that, you know, the continued personal development, and maybe some of the flaws and pitfalls within that. So let's start with, I'm happy to lead this off, Amy, but I was just going to go with, like, what did you think of your PT training? What did you think of your qualification, like your original, right, you are now whether it's like a fitness instructor or coach or PT, what did you think of it?
Well, why don't you start? Because A, you're older than me, and B, you probably did yours slightly before I did. So if you say yours...
Had to get that in there, didn't you? Eh?
Just saying.
Another ageist reference there.
Well, you start with yours, and then I'll say mine, and we can see how maybe they've evolved in that short space of time, and if they've evolved ever since.
Yeah, so I'll try and keep this brief. So I did the premier training qualification, and it was like an intensive course over, it was 3 months all in all, with like sports massage and stuff tacked on the end of it. And I would say, yeah, brief notes on it, good things, good points. A couple of the tutors were incredibly good, incredibly enthusiastic, really they kind of made the sessions, I would say. The syllabus, I think, was a mixed bag. I think that, like, the fitness instructor one was really good as a foundation level and getting the basics. The personal training one, looking back at it now, I think there was almost, I don't think there was too much theory, but I think the theory was probably sufficient. But I think the hours on the gym floor were, like, criminally undercooked. When I think about them being let loose in a gym off the back of that, I don't think, and actually I'd never thought of it like this until I'd seen some of the notes that Amy had made for this episode, but there is very little emphasis, or there was for me, on relationship building, having empathy for clients, meeting clients where they're at, actually the communication side of things. Whereas there was a lot on, how do you set up a bench press? And the thing with how do you set up a bench press, okay, there are subtleties to it and there are things to learn, but you can get that nailed down pretty quickly. Whereas, and what about this client? And what about this woman who's menopausal, who's got adult children living at home? And what about this guy who's working a shift and stuff? There was a couple of scenarios we did, you know, but it was almost like, it was all based around, okay, what's the best exercises to pick, as opposed to how do you coach? How do you actually work with someone as an individual? What about you?
Yeah, definitely agree. I mean, when I did my level 2 and level 3, so level 2 is your gym instructor and level 3 is your personal training qualification. So I did mine distance learning for a start. which was a great way to do it. I mean, one thing that I've done a lot of my qualifications distance learning, or just like 1 day a week at college when I was doing my teaching qualification. So you do learn a lot about yourself in that, how you learn and how you like to take in information. So that's the good thing about doing that distance learning. And then you had like a phone call with a tutor where they'd ask you a few questions and stuff, and that was fine. But I definitely agree in terms of massive technical emphasis in terms of what exercises you do for what muscles. In terms of nutritional knowledge, it's very slim on the level 2 and level 3, very much in line with government guidelines, which aren't bad at all. The government guidelines are there for a reason, and that, you know, they're substantial for enough to live a healthy lifestyle. They're not bad guidelines at all. But yeah, it wasn't about creating a relationship with the client. It wasn't about how to set up a consultation process. It was all very much, okay, so this is how you measure someone's body fat, and this is how you use calipers. And I'm like, hang on a minute, I'm meeting someone for the first time and you want me to take calipers to the skin folds underneath their arms? Like,
how mad, by the way, is that, like, you spend so long with those calipers, and soon as I got to the gym, you realize within about a week, oh, I'm never going to use these.
Never going to use them. Because even when you're doing your level 3, they're like, oh, it's really hard for you to use these accurately. And you're like, oh yeah, that ain't happening. And then you learn how to...
So they're inaccurate, massively invasive, and people generally hate them. Wow, yeah. What a fantastic tool that is. Yeah. Let's spend a week practicing it. No, let's not, because it's a waste of our time.
No. Yeah, it's just ridiculous stuff like that. It really is. And so even though my level 3 was distance learning, we did like weekends where in the gym where you did your assessments and your practicals and stuff. So that was quite cool. And again, tutors were great, really, really knowledgeable, really like helpful. But the face-to-face time was just not great. And again, not good about people skills. And a lot, I will say all of the people skills and all of the tools that I have picked up on over the years that create that relatedness and create that understanding and talk about building those relationships with people are things that I have learned from the courses and the education that I've been given from my customer service side. So it's from all the things for flying and through the management courses I've done. They've been the most beneficial in terms of like people skills, I would say. But then there's the course I'm doing now, which is the level 4 nutritional coach qualification. And I would say that is a lot better. There is a lot of emphasis on building relationships, motivational interviewing, how you do a proper consultation, how you create a good working relationship between a client and coach, boundary setting, and meeting somebody where they're at. So we do actually do a lot of case studies as well in terms of different people, what is applicable for one client isn't applicable for another. So it's that whole thing. And like one thing that they teach you quite early on in my level 4, and this might be something you learn as well, is when you're thinking about actually applying your knowledge, you've got 3 things you need to think about. You always want to stay evidence-based, obviously, as much as you can. So there is a certain level of applying the evidence you've got, but it's also got to be within your clinical expertise. So is it just your opinion? Is it what you've done for the last 10 years, which has proven results? Or is it that balanced with the evidence, but also you have to take into account the individual you've got in front of you. So there's no point me saying to my client, you have to have 9 hours sleep a night, even though I know that it would be optimal for him. And in my clinical expertise, it works for me. If the individual in front of me, it isn't physically possible for them to get 9 hours of sleep a night. So yeah, it's the fine balance of all 3. But yeah, definitely too much emphasis on the technical in the level 3, and it'll be interesting to see if that has actually moved on. I don't really know anyone that's gone through that recently, to ask them.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because I do understand as well that, you know, if people doing intensive courses or even distance learning, and there's a certain amount of hours and a certain amount of kind of the curriculum you have to get through. So I know you can't have like endless hours working on this kind of stuff, but I would argue that once you've got a fundamental understanding of anatomy and physiology, and even a basic level of expertise in the gym, I would say, can you have a basic level of expertise or a basic level of understanding, let's say? I think you'd get better results and you'd have a better experience having a competent trainer, you know, competent in, you know, anatomy, physiology with exceptional communication skills, versus someone who's an absolute whiz in terms of anatomy, biomechanics and physiology, but just a bog standard communicator.
Yeah.
Like,
I was going to say, all very limited social skills and can't talk to somebody.
Yeah, who's really good at applying it to themselves, but not necessarily to other people. So, like, to summarize that little section, I think, and what we're going to move on to now is, you know, continued development, continued personal development. I think our experiences are, you know, they're not awful. They're not like we've had like, oh, personal training qualifications are terrible. I think they're lacking in certain areas, but nothing is perfect. But I think where the industry does fall down, and let itself down quite badly, is what happens after you've qualified, in terms of you have to be an extremely proactive individual that cares massively, and that is seeking out these courses and putting yourself on them and funding them yourself. And actually, you know, rightly so, people should expect that. But if you're starting PT and it's, you know, it's day one or year one, you are spending a lot of time trying to build that business and build a client base. And actually, you know, shelling out 200, 300, 400 quid on courses, you know, a few of those a year, that's, you know, that can be quite daunting. That, you know, that can be, that's quite tricky. And I don't know, I think you had the stat, Amy, about how many PTs quit.
Yeah, I think most PTs quit in the first 12 to 18 months, because it's hard. It's really hard. And you used a great analogy earlier when we were talking about something completely different. You're like, you sometimes come out of these courses and you think you almost know everything and you're so keen to impart knowledge on everyone. And then you start working with people or talking to other people and trying to expand your knowledge, and you realize you know actually nothing. And then you gain a little confidence enough, maybe in one area, and you gain confidence to speak about it enough. But again, like, experience counts for a lot. It really does. But do not underestimate the power of the soft skills and actually being able to talk to people, which probably comes on to our, like, a couple of our next points, really, in terms of like CPD and continuous personal development, and what qualifications someone has, or what do people look for in a PT or a coach. Because I know a lot of people that just look for someone that's in good condition themselves, not what qualifications do you have and how many years experience. So sometimes, like, the gold standard, or what people think makes a good PT, especially in, I would say, the gym or maybe bodybuilding world, is being in good condition yourself.
Yeah, which is not necessarily the best gauge. I mean, what if you see someone who's in incredible condition, what you can say, you know, fairly certainly, is that they know their body pretty well, and they know what works for them, and they know how to follow a diet and follow a training plan. So actually, some things that can definitely, they can pass on, but yeah, the relevance of that to the individual in front of them is going to be very mixed. Now, if you're like a bodybuilder, if you're a bodybuilder you know, you say you're a 30-year-old bodybuilder, PT, and your client base is predominantly guys in their early 20s who are competing in bodybuilding, then you can probably apply a lot of the methods that work to you and you'll be all right. You know, you'll get pretty good results. But if you're dealing with the public at large, which, you know, most PTs are, it becomes apparent so quickly that if you try and impart what worked for you on everyone else, that it doesn't work. Like the success rate is not good. And I think there's a few reasons I think PTs drop out of the industry. I think definitely back in the day, it's definitely getting better now, but back in the day, I think there was a criminal lack of support. Like, you know, when you pay like thousands of pounds to get your qualification, you're kind of left to it. I mean, as much as they talk about the reps register and stuff.
Yeah, it's crap. Sorry.
It's some of those, I'm not joking, and I'm not going to name names, but some of those courses I went on, it's almost like the instructors and the tutors there knew that it was almost like an unsaid thing that we're all turning out there just to get the points. And it was like, look, we'll let you knock off early, just fill this out. Yeah. And it's like, this is about extracting 200 quid from me for this afternoon. So I pay £200. I learn next to nothing. You get your tutor fee. I get to put my name on the reps register, and we all go off on our happy little way. Yeah. And initially I was just like going through the motions, because I was like, early on it became, oh, well, I'm not really learning anything, but I'm getting my reps, you know, keep my reps level 3. I keep my name on the register. I get my insurance for it. All good. As I got a bit older, I started to really resent it. and I started to think, actually, I feel like I'm being fleeced here, and I don't. And something that we talked about again before we started recording was, no one ever asks if you're on the reps register. They don't ask what qualifications you've got. So actually, if you can find someone to insure you, then it's like, what, there used to be some kudos for being on the register. Now I'm like, I don't even know if it's still going, because that's that side of things. I think that's what kind of leads, you know, people out of the industry, because they feel like, oh wow, I've paid this money. I've been kind of left with an insufficient set of skills to start a business, and now there's no kind of body or anyone looking after me or anyone I can turn to. That's a big reason. I think another reason, kind of leaning on the, you know, people who look good, people who get into the gym think, well, I love training in the gym. I'll love being a personal trainer or a coach. And what they quickly realize is that training yourself in the gym and training someone else is a completely different. It's not like being in the gym with your mates. No. And like we just jump in and out and we have a bit of a laugh and hit a bit of bench or whatever. It's completely different, a completely different expectation. And I just don't think people are made aware of that when they go in. And I don't think you suddenly realize the array of skills that you're going to need, and you either develop them, or you either have them, you develop them, or you get out of the industry. That's it.
Massively. I definitely don't think there's enough critical thinking in the industry, in terms of, obviously, like in nutrition, there's a lot more critical thinking when you get into it, because there's a lot more, say, nuances. But in terms of PT and actually training in a physical sense, there's not enough critical thinking in terms of, okay, so we've got Susan, she's 54, she's 5'3", she does X, Y, Z. How would we approach that? Okay, and then what if? And then what if? There's not enough challenging. There's not enough, I say avatar work, because that's what a lot of what we do at Liftoff, but there's not enough like, okay, so how would you go about this one? And in those situations, there's no right or wrong answer, because it is very, you apply the evidence, you apply your expertise, and then you apply the needs of the individual. But there's not enough troubleshooting almost around those kind of things. There definitely just is, okay, this is the prescription, off you go. This would work for anybody. And yes, technically it would. But when you think about things like lifestyle factors, you know, emotional factors,
you
like,
took the words out of my mouth. In my head, I was like, the lifestyle stuff, and it's literally that's the next word you said.
Yeah, lifestyle factors, emotional factors, relationship factors, not just like personal relationships or interpersonal relationships, but also like relationships with food and things like that. Like it's just huge. I mean, I would struggle to be somebody's coach if I could not be honest and with them and feel like they were being honest with me. And like, we've all been there in gyms and stuff, and we've seen PT sessions, and the PT is either on their phone, the client looks bored to tears, or looks like they're actually really struggling sometimes as well. And you can just kind of
trapped underneath a barbell.
Yeah.
Spot me, bro. Help.
Whereas the PT's like swiping right and stuff, like, and like you're kind of like, where's the understanding there? Where's the understanding? And like that, I don't think there's enough of that. And I'm not saying that every PT out there is completely crap, because that's not true at all. But there's definitely a distinction between those who do take on a lot more self-led continuous personal development and those that choose not to. But like, look how much the industry in itself has evolved over the years. Look at the inclusion of new types of evidence, new ways of exercising. And I find it quite bizarre to think that there's not been any adaptation of the way we're actually delivering these skills to the people that want to learn them.
Yeah, and I think you can, the amount of resources for PTs now, if they want to better themselves and actually learn kind of on the job, is unbelievable now versus like when I started, or even probably 5-10 years ago. But yeah, you are reliant on a PT that takes their shit seriously and treats it like a career. Because for me, I kind of got into it because it was something I enjoyed doing. I didn't know like where it was going to lead, and as I got a little bit older, it becomes as serious as you take it, and you're going to get. I just started looking at it differently. It kind of dawned on me as I got a little bit older, the amount of responsibility that I had. And
Huge.
then that's a knock on, that kind of knocks you on to think, oh, I've got to get better at this. I have to get better at this set of skills or this method of training. Or in my case with nutrition, I was like, I've got to get better at this because I'm trying to deliver weight loss here on the gym floor, and I'm ill-equipped to do it.
Yeah.
And that's like a practical thing that you can actually, that's almost an easy thing to learn, nutrition. Again, the nuts and bolts of nutrition, we said this on an earlier podcast, nuts and bolts of nutrition, fairly easy in terms of getting the big blocks in place. How you deliver it, how you apply it to a client and their lifestyle considerations, completely different. And one thing I will say before I hand back over, and we're talking about when you brought up lifestyle considerations the first time round, before you hire a PT, and I'm definitely not saying that all PTs are bad, but they're on a spectrum. They are definitely on a spectrum, and a PT that might fit me might not fit Amy, and vice versa. Speak to them before you hire them, or at least say, right, I'm going to book 3 sessions in, or 2 sessions, and you're not going to get all the technical stuff in those 2 sessions, but I guarantee you're going to get a good feel for the person and how they work. Or if you're in a gym, observe what PTs do. Don't go and sign up with a PT that's on their phone for 30 minutes of a session with another client. Talk to other clients or other clients in the gym who are training with that PT. Oh, what's Amy like? Oh, what's her approach like? Oh, she kind of like quite strict, or can I talk to her about my food as well? Oh no, she's great. She's studying that at the moment. She'll be able to really help you out. You're not taking yourself into a garage to have like the oil changed and then go out again. That's not, you have to look at it as, if I want to get anything out of working with a PT, you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
So like going in just thinking, oh, I'll just get beasted for a session, or maybe I'll get beasted for a few weeks, that wears off really quickly. That wears off really, really quickly. And then, do you know what? If you like that person, you like getting beasted, there's plenty of people that do it and they'll pay to get beasted every week. But if you want progression, if you want help with your diet, if you want, to build a relationship and actually work with someone, then I think there's a certain emphasis on the client who hires the PT to do a bit of research beforehand.
Yeah.
Big time.
And you just took the words right out of my mouth then, because I was like, I was about to say, ask that PT how they approach it. Because if you go up to a PT and you say, oh, can you talk to me about your approach when you're working with clients? And they honestly don't know what to say back to you, that's because they don't have an approach. They have a one size fits all. And anyone that is interested in coaching an individual through exercise and lifestyle and nutrition will have an approach that they take. So I always say to all my clients, I'm really reflective in my approach. So we do a lot of client-led goals. Our check-ins are very much like, how did you feel this week went? In terms of documents I ask them to fill in, it's like, you're going to rate yourself on how you think you did this week. And you're going to really be able to look back and see your progress. And that is, I'm very much able to verbalize the approach I take. Other people will be, right, well, we do X, Y, Z we start with this and then we build in this, and people will speak about it and they'll be really passionate about it if they are able to verbalize it. If you're asking someone what their approach is to how they deal with their clients, and they're like, oh, well, I just write you a program and then we'll do PT once a week. And then, yeah, I'll take the reps down from like 15 to 12. And then, yeah, we'll like do that. And like, what? You're prescriptive. You're being too prescriptive. You might as well sign up to some kind of online plan. And I really get to know my clients. I get to know what makes them tick. And that is what's so important about things that we wrote down as well in the notes, isn't it? About the things that they don't teach you, which I think are really, really key to underpinning successful, not just client coach relationships, but any relationships in general, even in business, like empathy, relatedness, understanding, a real putting yourself in someone else's shoes, which I would love to see in more kind of coaching courses. I think they're so important. And like something else that you wrote down in the notes, actually, Andy, which I'd never even really thought about, but the lack of regulations with regards to, PTs keeping up their qualifications and keeping up their level of knowledge. Like, whilst experience does count for a lot, okay, how much have things actually moved on since you did your training? Is there anything that you could actually benefit from, being maybe audited or anything like that? Like in my role, when my full-time job was as a flight attendant and a safety instructor, my safety coordinator had to come in and watch me teach a day of my class every single year to make sure that I was doing everything that I should be doing in a the proper format, making sure all the points were getting across, making sure that the students felt comfortable, that the tone wasn't too harsh. Like, there was a certain degree of regulations, and I think that's, you wrote that down and I'd completely overlooked that point when we were thinking about this, but I think that's really important as well.
And it's incredibly difficult to regulate. Like, that's a good example, actually. So someone coming like someone coming in to watch over you for a day, is going to get a good kind of sample of how you behave and how you deliver that training. It's really hard for people to come and sit in on your PT sessions because you're kind of one-to-one. So immediately, like, once you break that dynamic, the relationship changes. Do you know what I mean? It's a third person in the room. It's like a classroom, even. It's probably a little bit like you'll feel an element of pressure having someone stood there with a clipboard watching you. Well, imagine that's like 3 people in a room, like someone sitting in the consultation. That's hard to monitor that. And ongoing, it's not like that we've got people coming around watching us PT people in the gym. We just don't have that. So you're bound by this, or you should be bound by that duty of care and the do no harm. And you get gym members to fill out their park queues, and obviously if they've had a fall, or if they've broken a bone, or if they've started taking different medication, it's kind of it's on them to tell you. And like, how often, I mean, I don't know if you've had this. A number of times I've got a session like you planned out and someone rocks up and they're like, yeah, I fell off my bike yesterday. My knee's bad. And you look at their knee and it's like the size of a watermelon. You're like, well, my session's completely trash now, mate. What are we gonna do now? And you'll kind of muddle along and do something, but it's, in a way, that's quite good because they're like, oh shit, he's not just making it up on the fly. There's actually some kind of plan here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, you're just speak to your PT and ask them about it. And you don't need to know every last qualification because they're, you know, if you tell someone that you're level 3 or level 4, unless they've got any knowledge of like the training world, they're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. But what you can do is talk on and demonstrate a level of expertise and knowledge like within those sessions. But it's so much of it is on you to go out and get those qualifications and keep up to speed. I've learned more like on my own online, reading stuff and watching videos and listening to people who I've discovered to be reputable than I have sat in a classroom. And I've learned even more on the gym floor than I have that. Like the classroom teaching is probably, again, great as a start, but as soon as you get out and you start working with the general public, its relevance drops big time.
I was literally just about to ask you actually how you take in a lot of your information and how you do actually support your own development. Because I know we talk about it before, like the whole reason we started this podcast was because we use each other sometimes as a bit of a resource and to like chat through things and bounce off things. And I know that you do that with your other PTs in the gym you work in, and I definitely do that with the PTs and the coaches in my gym that I work in. We have like meetings, and half of it is just a meeting and a catch up about what's going on, and then the other half is always a little bit of education. So that's really important. Obviously we use each other for that. I know we both listen to podcasts as well, which is great when we know that they're like come in their different forms as well. So some are a bit more evidence based, some are a bit more holistic, some are obviously quite entertaining as well. There's also like obviously research publications online. I think it is about finding, like you say, a reputable resource of information in whatever field you're interested in and using that in order to further your knowledge, but also understanding the realms of its applicability. So just because you may have a bias towards one source of information, or you know, one thing that maybe confirms your understanding, you still have to be aware of the individual you have in front of you. And I think that's always very important to keep, is keeping a check on yourself, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if you're into it as well, like if you've got an interest in your industry, that obviously helps massively because learning about new ideas or watching videos or listening to podcasts on like nutrition and health and fitness, it doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like you're interested in it, one, so you get like, you know, just to broaden your own knowledge, and also, the added bonus, you then can start to take that into your sessions with clients, or you might hear something that's interesting and you can pass on to a client. I mean, me personally, I definitely use podcasts a lot because I like being able to kind of walk, you know, go out for a long walk and put like an hour and a half podcast on, and I'll do that whole thing in one hit. And then if it's really good, I'll listen back and I'll take bits out of it. Or if they mention resources, or if they speak about someone's work, then I can look them up. So I'll kind of go, it's like, you know, you pull on a bit of thread and suddenly you discover a bunch of different stuff. So that's really helpful. YouTube videos I quite like, but again, you have to be, it's knowing reputable people. I mean, via Facebook, I've found so many kind of good people that are rooted in science. So like they've got like a, you know, like a little circle of like evidence-based kind of in the science people. And a lot of that stuff, I'm never, ever, you know, for 95% of my clients, I'm never, ever going to need to regurgitate any of that. But as an underpinning for me, it's essential. Like, so there's a guy called Eric Helms who God knows how many years ago now. I mean, it will still be on YouTube. He did a series of videos called the nutrition pyramid. So he was the first one to jump on the pyramid bandwagon. Now there's loads of them.
Pyramid for everything.
Yeah, exactly. Just put it in a pyramid and it instantly gains credibility. But he basically spoke about, calories, macros, micros, nutrient timing, and supplements. And he talked about them in that order, and just how it should be seen in that order. So, calories is your foundation, then building up. And then he did a separate video at the end talking about how behavior and lifestyle underpins everything. And he's like, I deliberately left this video to the end because, you want to try and hook people in. And people think this stuff's not important, but it really is. And it was it's shot on him with on a whiteboard. The camera's not great. The sound's not brilliant. It's kind of, it's like a dull classroom. But when I watched it, I was like, oh my God, in however many minutes that total thing is, probably an hour, 10-minute videos. If everyone watched that, you'd know more than 99% of the people out there.
Yeah.
If you just sat and watched that from start to finish. And since then, lots of people talk about it and the importance of calories and all that kind of stuff. But he was the first I'd seen break it down like that. And he was talking about it in respect to, working with bodybuilders and adjusting macros and stuff like that. But I was like, oh my God, it was a real game changer. It was kind of talking about flexible dieting and when to implement it and all that kind of stuff. And I don't even know how I came across that. But once I got that in my head, I was like, oh, that knowledge of how things work and how to prioritize things in terms of weight loss and fat loss, that was invaluable. That was just at the time, I was like, this is brilliant.
But also, I think it's really important to touch on the fact that your experience has also allowed you to take in that information and know when to apply it with the individual that's in front of you. So if you've got somebody that has, I know we always keep coming back to this, but really obsessive relationship with food, history of crash diets for the last 15 years, you're not going to be like, oh, well, I just watched a video by Mr. Eric Helms and he talks about calories and macros and I need you to go on 1,500 calories and track 160 grams of carbohydrates, double your protein to 120 grams a day, and you're only on 50 grams of fat. Do you know what I mean? Whereas there are people out there who they don't meet the individual where they are at. We have to take into account what the individual values, what they place importance on, and the client, within reason, I'm not saying that we're going to be ridiculously submissive as coaches, but the client within reason dictates the goal and what they are prepared to change. And all we can do is hold their hand along the way, guide them, make recommendations. And what usually happens when you take someone on these kind of journeys is one change very, very slowly leads to the other. And you just kind of chip away a little bit. And these health promoting behaviors, they're called health promoting because they lead on from one another. So you make a change in one area of your life, and all of a sudden, we talked about this before on that diet versus exercise podcast, you make a change in one area and change usually starts to come in another. But it's understanding that as a coach and how to get somebody there within the realms of their own lifestyle. If they come at you and they're like, right, I want to have a 6-pack and I want you to calculate my calories and macros for me, but I've got a really high stressful job and I'm only sleeping 4 hours a night, but I'm going to do this. I have to do this. You can't necessarily say, okay, well, that isn't important. What you want isn't important because you need to start sleep and reduce your stress. Yeah. That might not be an option for them. So how can you make that goal? How can you make that goal something that they want without adding to their capacity bucket within the realms of their lifestyle? And that is where your softer skills come in, like empathy, relatedness, understanding, expertise, looking at the individual in front of you. And you can teach people and people can take in as much information as they want for in the world, but it's knowing when to regurgitate and word vomit that information.
But like when we spoke about, because I think those things that you mentioned there, empathy, relatedness, things like compassion, understanding, as much as I think they should be emphasized in PT's training, you can learn about the concepts, but you have to put them into practice.
Oh, massive.
Like you need to sharpen them and you need to hone them, and that you can learn around it. You should, I think what people should be, or PT should be made aware of, is the importance that they hold, and knowing that when you go in to like those, first set of consultations, how important they are, and they should be like at the forefront of your mind. And then, as time goes on, if you are aware of them, then you can start to build on them. Some people it comes naturally to, it's their way. And that's, you meet people like that are good. If someone's a good communicator, like if you stand up and you deliver if you're really good at public speaking, or if you're good at like delivering the courses, like previously, like when you're a flight attendant, then there's a bunch of those skills that can transfer over real nicely to work in one-to-one. I just think as a client, when you sit down and you have that consultation and you are discussing with your PT, like what you want to do, I mean, we a lot of the time we ask that question, why. That was one of yours, ask why. And as PTs, like definitely me and you will dig around a little bit, and like, why do you want to do this? And it's not in a challenging way, it's just to dig a little bit deep. If someone's walked in and they've paid you a sum of money and they're giving up their time on a 6 o'clock on a Friday morning, there's a good reason probably that they're there. And actually, in terms of goals and individual goals, all of the majority of the people, one thing that you can kind of blanket people with, it's going to be to feel better in some way. Now, whether that comes in the form of weight loss or general health or improving sleep or just improving the quality of the diet, hopefully the end result is generally feeling better in some way. How you go about that's what you have to sit down and discuss and almost negotiate with the PT, because a perfect one might be something like pick weight loss. If you're prepared to do whatever that PT says, then the PT might be able to tell you, oh, wow, okay, well, if you commit to all of that and we're happy that it fits in with your lifestyle, we can get there in 6 weeks. We can knock that half stone off in 6 weeks. I feel confident that you've told me you're happy to take on all these changes. That's great. If you go in there and you're like, well, my sleep's not great, I can't really change that. I do like to go out and have a curry and a few beers on a Friday night with the boys. And actually we meet up on Sunday for like a family roast with everyone. And I can't be on top of all my meals and stuff. Can you still achieve your goal at the end of it? Yeah, you can, but I'm not going to give you the same plan as the guy who can do it in 6 weeks. We're going to look at 6 months and we're going to look at some incremental changes along the way. And then sometimes a bit of a trade-off with, oh, well, I want it quicker than that. Well, I'm telling you, like, if you want it quicker than that, we have to make this a bit harder. And from what you've told me thus far, I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the best approach. But again, that is not a black and white, that's the end of it. You have to, this is where the push and pull and you can do it like this, but you have to sacrifice this. We can make it a bit easier, but it's going to take a little bit longer. Like you have to, and that's where honesty is one of our core principles comes in. Get that shit out front in session 1, so it's all on the table and it's all there. Yeah. And then we're both adults in the room. Then it's like, cool, let's make decisions based on that. Massively.
Honesty is key to success, really, with clients and to managing their own expectations as well. You've got to learn to be honest as well as a client, rather than just promising the blue pill. And nice little Matrix reference there.
I love Matrix.
And we need to watch that again. Actually, we've got to get into that trilogy.
I hope it's still good. I feel like it will still be good.
I feel like it is. It'll still be good. Only number 1 though. It goes a bit downhill after that. Yeah. Anyway, I forgot where I was going with that honesty thing, but I think that's a good place to probably leave it.
Yeah, I think we've hammered it pretty nicely there. I will say with the honesty thing, I don't know if you were going down this route, but if you take two of the core principles that we hold dear as coaches, so honesty and empathy, we probably mentioned them in every single podcast that we've done so far. Yeah. Well, the honesty part of it comes with, laying things out on the table. Right, this is what it's going to take to get here. You've told me you've been honest with your food diary or honest with your lifestyle considerations. This is what I'm going to advise. Now, if the client turns around and says, I'm not going to do that, I don't think I can do that, that's not for me, well, then you've got two choices as a trainer. You can either kind of take offense to that and just keep reiterating the initial point. You're still being honest, but you're just very stubborn at that point. Or you can say, do you know what? He doesn't sleep very well and he does want to spend a bit more time with his child. And actually, that's probably a bit more important than this. So I'm going to put myself in his shoes, bend a little bit here. It's going to take a couple weeks longer, but that's actually probably better. That's all. That's how I see empathy. Like, put yourself in that person's shoes, and it might go against your ideal on paper plan, but that doesn't matter in the grand scheme.
Yeah,
really.
I mean, who am I to tell somebody with a 1-year-old daughter that values their time with them over an hour in bed, that they should be valuing that hour in bed? I'm not a...
Get back to bed.
Get back to bed. Do not play with your daughter. Those times are precious, but it makes it sound like, I don't want it to come across like the client dictates everything. There are times when I'm like, okay, well, you're telling me if this is the goal, I really would like you to try and implement this because it's going to get you that little bit closer.
Yeah. It's going to make your life easier. It's going to improve results.
Exactly. And they're like, oh, I don't have time to food prep. Well, do you cook dinner? Yeah, I cook dinner. Okay, well, could you just whack a couple of chicken breasts in the oven while you're cooking dinner and there's your protein for the next day? Oh, yeah, I could probably do that. Okay, I really would like you to try and do that. There are things where you do push it a little bit more, but it's like, I suppose it's like being a parent, of which I am not, but it's like having a really informed conversation or debate with anybody. You've got to pick your battles. You really have got to pick your battles. Yeah. And like, empathy and understanding and honesty are very key to that. Knowing what might just be a topic to maybe shelve for later on down the line. Yeah. Knowing, like, when you're having a conversation, you hear all these words coming at you from clients, and I'm like, I'm just going to pick out those. Okay, we're going to focus on that one. I'm going to shelve that for later. Oh, I feel like, do I look like I'm in front of one of those screens? And I'm like,
No, do you know what I'm doing? I'm picturing you like, what is the film? Is it Good Will Hunting, when he's kind of like working out the formula and he's just got it all, scribbling it down? That's what I'm picturing.
Well, I'm like that with words, because I think about words. So you hear like stress, you hear sleep, you hear food, you hear prep, you hear family, you hear 100%. Shift worker. And I'm like pulling all these things out. I'm like, right, okay, what are my easy wins? What are the first key things that are going to give me wins? That. What is going to be an issue for later down the road? That. What am I going to get resistance on? That. Like, and you're really juggling all these things rather than going, right, here are your calories, here are your macros, here's your protein, off you go. See you later. See you in a month. Let me know how much you weigh. Yeah.
Oh, mate, I feel like we've had a second wind here, right? So picking up on that, like when you sit in a consultation, here's something that I never do, I never used to do, but now is like one of the first things I do. So initially, like during consultation, it'd be like, right, tell me what you eat, and then you'd be like, oh, well, for breakfast I have toast, whatever, and I'll be scribbling it all down. That means nothing, basically. You can almost throw that out. It's polite to ask that stuff, but it's not useful when you come away from the consultation. One of the first questions I'll ask now will be, oh, yeah, have you got a family? Oh, you live with your missus, children? Yeah. Oh, what are their names? Oh, how old are they? Oh, 2 and 6. Oh, what are their names? I'll write that down every single time. And that's because I know once I've got them written there, those two little people are probably the most important thing to that parent sat in front of me. So therefore, they should be at the top, and they sit next to the client's name. It'll be, maybe it'll be age next, but directly underneath that will be, like their kind of marital status and if they've got children. Because when I go away to write a plan, it needs to be there on top. And if you're, and I've been here and I'm still here, I'm not a parent, but I've got a lot more empathy now as a, you know, as a 38-year-old, better get my age in again.
How old?
38-year-old, yeah, exactly. As a 38-year-old with, you know, a nephew and a lot of my friends, you know, all my kind of closest group of school friends have got children. So I see it now, and I might not live it, but I've got a level of empathy now that I couldn't have as a 23-year-old, 24-year-old. I just couldn't. And actually at the time, when I was like a 24, 25-year-old PT, the gym was probably one of the most important things like in my life. Like socially, I really cared. Like I wouldn't miss workouts. It was so important. And now it's not quite as important. It's still important, but it's just dropped down the pecking order a bit. And again, 95% of the people that you'll meet as a PT, gym, you know, going to hit squat PBs is not going to be a priority for them. You will have clients that it is, but the majority is not going to be that. And you have to, when you write that perfect program, you have to bear that in mind, because they might not want to be getting up 5 days a week and eating, you know, some highly restrictive diet. That might not play out.
Well, you've just said it there, that perfect program. Well, it ain't so perfect for that individual.
it's fallen flat on its face in week one. Oh, mate, that was good. I've enjoyed that.
That was good fun. That was really good fun. Yeah. And I just think it's always good to question why you're going to someone, if they serve you, if they understand you, and yeah, reflect on that as well, because what you might have been with your PT for, you know, maybe 3-4 years. Are they still the right person for you in that place in your life as well? So yeah,
have a conversation with them, because I tell you what, it's a difficult place. Like we're not digging out PTs here. That PT might be like, I'd like to bring up doing this, but they've got in a bit of a routine as well. And they're a bit worried if they change it, you might not enjoy it. So if you're a PT that's had a client and you'll kind of feel like you're in that bit of a rut, or in a, you know, you're just going through the motions, it happens. Like it does happen, and it happens unwittingly sometimes. Have a conversation. If you're a client and you do want to expand on this a bit more, or you haven't had that conversation with a PT, do you know what? Have it in session, or even better, book in and sit down and and spend an hour and just go through, right, what are we doing? What are the goals? We haven't talked about this for a while. Where am I at? And then hopefully that actually might, if you've got a good PT, that excites them, and they're like, oh yeah, cool. Let's plan. Let's kind of set some more goals. But
massively,
yeah, all good, mate. Right.
That was good fun. We definitely got a second wind halfway through.
Yeah, I know, it was good. I feel like you instigated that, and I just piggybacked off the back of your enthusiasm.
Just constant, Andy, just dragging you along with me.
Honestly, it's a good job you squat, because you're going to be carrying me on that back for a while. So just keep going.
Oh, that was fun. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Not Another Fitness podcast. If you liked what we do, please subscribe and share. Tell all your friends. And if you want to follow us over on our socials, you'll find me and my contact details over on Instagram @TheFlyingFoodCoach. And you'll find Andy
over at Facebook at the Facebook group Eat, Move, Lift, Enjoy, or feel free to drop me an email on info@andrewjohnscraggs.com. Thanks again for listening. Until next time. That'll do.
Yeah, that'll do. That's good.
That'll do. I'll put that on there as well. That'll do.